All right, everyone. Hello and welcome back to Track 1, Owning Your Future with a Rare Disease. We hope you enjoyed the networking lunch break sponsored by Avexis. I'm Jane Nicholson, and I will be your host for this afternoon's session. As a reminder, this track is being live streamed, and I would like to welcome all of our remote attendees and remind everyone to download their mobile app so that we can use our live Q&A. So, in this session, Crafting a Career, Making a Fulfilling Professional Life with a Rare Disease, our experts will explore the professional workforce when living with a rare disease. From interviewing to landing the job to ensure your health needs are met while still maintaining a successful career. To share their expertise, let's welcome Francie Fitzgerald, patient advocate and health social work at University of Pennsylvania, and Candace Lerman, attorney and patient advocate at Rare Candace. That will get started.
All right, so I want to start with a little disclaimer that I'm at the very infancy of my career. So this will be more about choosing a career because I'm in fact still in grad school. All right, so a little about myself. I studied at the University of Notre Dame as an undergraduate. I studied neuroscience, and I thought that the exposure I had to the biology and psychology of human behavior was really important in the realm of patient advocacy that has come to matter so much to me, which led me to the University of Pennsylvania's School of Social Policy and Practice, where they actually have developed a healthcare specialization for social work, and that's what I'm pursuing right now. And as I said, it's been great because it's related directly to my passion for patient advocacy, which is something that I engaged with after graduation in a volunteer capacity with the Ehlers-Danlos Society as well as Dysautonomia International. I was also blessed to be able to speak at the Buller-Parsegan Center for Rare and Neglected Diseases at my alma mater at the University of Notre Dame. So for these organizations, it's been very rewarding to be able to review grants. I've been able to sit on their patient advocacy boards for quite a while, and specifically with the Ehlers-Danlos Society, I've been involved in a patient-centered outcomes research initiative funded Comorbidity Coalition, which has been important and integral to promoting kind of the collaborative research that Dr. Feigenbaum spoke about earlier. And it was challenging for me graduating and not being able to go straight into a full-time career as many of my peers did because I was juggling so much with my health. And it was through this volunteerism that I was able to see how I could convert it into a career. And grad school is one of those steps that has been important for me in attaining that. So if we talk more globally about how to find the right fit professionally, I think so much of it comes down to an alignment of finding our values and what matters to us, and then matching that with what is considered to be our greatest talents or skills or abilities. And this necessitates a lot of self-exploration. And in order to kind of enhance that self-understanding, you have to dive deeper into your awareness of what makes you you, and that involves often starting with the basics. And the very basics of our biology are obviously our genetics. And for me, it was important to learn about the nature element of what I was born with. And it wasn't until I was out of college that I did whole genome sequencing that helped elucidate some of the complicated medical situations I'd been in for over a decade. And this understanding of my take that information and in the light of all my environmental experiences and see where I am now and what I can potentially offer to any field. And I earlier was thinking about the New York Times title for Dr. Feigenbaum's piece, and he said it was called Doctor Cure Thyself. And I thought a very relevant title for this would be Patient Advocate, Know Thyself. And so my speech is largely about the importance of gaining self-awareness. And in order to do so, I think one of the best things and the most important places to start is to ask your friends, ask your family, ask the people who have been with you through thick and thin, who've watched you grow, watched you evolve. Some have known you before illness, if you acquired it later in life, as I did, and have seen you kind of overcome certain things. And they're the people that will be able to remind you of the parts of you that you might forget when things aren't going well. I really, in particular, love this quote: "A friend is someone who knows the song in your heart and will sing it back when you forget the words." And I find that my support system does that for me very often. However, it's also helpful to explore your personality through potentially a less biased lens. And for this, I think you can turn to certain resources. These are just a few of the resources that have been helpful for me in helping to understand my personality. And I think we live in this really interesting time in modern medicine where it can be really gratifying to be a doctor who's able to see ailing patients, write them a script, send them home, and watch them get better. But as rare disease patients, we often challenge that model. And as the surgeon and author Atul Gawande wrote of the medical profession, nothing is more threatening to who you think you are than a patient with a problem you cannot solve. And often, as rare disease patients, that's exactly what we are. Their problem that they can't solve. And when a doctor's sense of self is called into question, I think it's not uncommon for them to unconsciously cause patients or those patients' caregivers to question their own identity. And that's where it goes back to the importance of knowing yourself at a level that can't be kind of questioned, or it can't be so easily off course based on someone else's confusion. And I would just like to mention an important part of this for me was also therapy. I found that it was very helpful after having gone through these challenges to my identity at such an early age and at such an important developmental milestone. Getting sick when I was an adolescent, for instance, it was helpful to kind of dig into some of that with a professional. And as I mentioned, these resources, and one in particular I wanted to bring up is this Strength Finders, because I think that when we question our identity, we really question the good in ourselves, and that doubt often causes us to focus less on our strengths and more on our limitations. So in speaking to Strength Finders, my next piece of advice is to play to your strengths. This guy up here is my service dog, Patty. I've been partnered with him for the past 4.5 years. He's currently on a staycation in Philadelphia, and I'm missing him a lot. But Patty is someone who has found his calling in life, for sure. He is just naturally so loyal, attentive, and eager to help. And this is what makes him able to do such a great job being a service dog. And while perfect Patty doesn't have to worry about his limitations, for us mere mortals, it is also important to know our limits. I believe that in order to be of service, we have to be fit for service. And we can't be fit for service if we're not tending to our needs. And we certainly can't tend to our needs if we don't know what they are. So this is all about setting ourselves up in spite of limitations that might come up as a result of our illnesses. And in recognizing those limitations, this sometimes might require us to procure accommodations. And an important lesson for me to learn in this journey has been how to advocate for those accommodations. In particular, in college, I co-founded a group for students with invisible illnesses. It was an all-female group, so we called ourselves the Invisililies. And we had a great time hosting a panel that brought together a lot of students and faculty and raised awareness about these conditions. And it was also a wonderful opportunity to really develop a great rapport with disability services, which can be so influential in the academic setting in helping students thrive in the face of these challenges. Not to mention, the Invisililies, not unlike Global Genes, served as a great support system, and that in and of itself is almost an accommodation. To have your tribe of people who get it really goes a long way. And sometimes fellow patients are the only people that can truly empathize to the degree that is helpful. And they're the ones that really understand the great losses that are inherent in illness. And this is my roommate who unfortunately and fortunately gets it. This was us at graduation. And what I wanted to speak to with this slide is this era that we're in. The president of the University of Pennsylvania and one of the professors, Jonathan Moreno, recently wrote a book on bioethics and transformation in healthcare. And they spoke to how we have moved into an era of halfway technologies. And by this they mean medicine can keep you alive, but not necessarily return you to your previous quality of life. Another beautiful way of describing this experience that is often very painful are the words of a contributor to The Atlantic who shared, "I could no longer touch the old delights of my life, just like a firefly could no longer touch the world beyond the jar in which it had been caught." And so with the acquisition of an illness that's so unexpected, there's this loss of an assumptive world and this earth-shattering tearing away of hopes and dreams and an imagined future. And for me, it's been important to realize how much grief is required in that occurring. And often that grief is compounded or complicated by medical trauma. Being treated for conditions that we know so little about requires a lot of trial and error that can be painful and cause trauma, basically. And in order to learn how to transform that pain and light up the world as the firefly in the jar in a unique and special way, I think a big part of it is tapping into the power to respond to these tragedies and this adversity and turning it into a empowering experience that can thenceforth kind of uplift and become a hope that's contagious. And it's a hope that I've garnered from a lot of the people here, and I'm thankful for that. So I believe that another important aspect of this is the idea that healing is relative, and the healing of our trauma takes time and is something that should be handled with care and a hefty dose of self-acceptance. And so practicing self-acceptance has also been an important part of my kind of coming to a career and everything. And I'd like to quote Susan Sontag, who said in her piece, "Illness as Metaphor, unfortunately, the less we understand about a disease, the more we tend to psychologize or stigmatize it." And I've seen this in myself as well as other people in the patient population. There is this internalization of the pathology and this over-identification with the victim that causes us to really ignore our giftedness and to have a harder time loving all of ourselves. And these books are a few of the resources and the education I've received in learning to embrace all parts of myself, and especially the ones that are hardest to love. Another tool that has helped me kind of make the most of what I have is the development of a self-care regimen, and it's something that's become a non-negotiable. So life with a rare disease is inherently unpredictable, and the lack of predictability really wears on us. This woman, Emily Fletcher, who wrote this book, Stress Less, Accomplish More, she's a meditation teacher for executives, and she has developed this concept of adaptation energy, which is the idea that throughout the course of a day, we are challenged by unexpected things that arise. And the amount of energy we have to deal with those unexpected circumstances makes a big difference. And she teaches meditation as a way to build up that adaptation energy. So meditation is one of the things I practice daily, and it has really helped me learn to move away from holding my breath and waiting for the next shoe to drop to literally breathing deeper. And another important tool, and everyone has their own version of self-care, but mine includes exercise and a careful consideration of how much sleep I get. These are all very important to me. I was given one of these rare disease magazines in my registration packet, and I noticed that Kristen Chenoweth was on the cover. She's a Broadway star that I've loved for years, since I was very little. And I had never known that she lived with a rare disease, but I found her description of her condition and her experience of balancing her career and health to be a really helpful way to think about it. She said that her symptoms usually arise without warning. She said, "You can't decide when it's going to happen, so you can't work around it." Inconvenient is a very respectable word for a very disrespectful disease. I thought that was a great way to explain it. So it wasn't until I really learned how to build up this adaptation energy and have a little extra of it that I was then ready to take what is arguably the hardest step, the first. And that involves a lot of trial and error. So maybe it's less of a step and it's more of a leap of faith, I don't know, but it is something that is necessary, and you have to just get out there and try things, even when it seems daunting and failure seems inevitable. But what I love about this idea is that self-awareness won't stop you from making mistakes, but it will allow you to learn from them. And so if you're going into this trial and error with a better understanding of who you are, then you have a greater chance of learning from it, even if it doesn't go well. And each time you try something and it works out, that builds up your confidence. But even when you try something and it doesn't work out, I found that can build your confidence too, because it builds your confidence in yourself that you can survive a blow and that you can stomach a letdown, you can self-soothe, and you can self-correct. And that's why I believe it's so important to learn to trust in your ability to adapt. Our human capacity for resiliency is just unbelievable, and I loved these little figures because children's human capacity for resiliency is even more extraordinary. And to realize that we will be able to overcome unexpected circumstances like the acquisition of a rare disease is something that we shouldn't take for granted, and we should we should rely on that a little more when we're losing confidence in ourselves. And a big part of that resiliency derives from a spiritedness that is sustained by a sense of purpose. I love this quote by the late Viktor Frankl, who was a survivor of the Holocaust and went on to become a psychotherapist who really transformed the lives of so many people. He says, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." And I believe that this meaning-making and this clinging to a sense of purpose is, like I said, it's a motivation that can sustain us through unimaginable things. And to speak to my specific why, that has sustained me through my education and my early career in social work, I want to talk about the social work code of ethics. Because as I said in the beginning, I believe the alignment of your values with your work and your talents and your abilities are so important. And for me, the ethic of social justice and the efforts to overcome these injustices have been a motivating force. Sadly, I've witnessed and experienced suffering at the hands of a medical establishment that is tasked with wanting to first do no harm. And it drives me to want to improve healthcare systems so that healthcare providers can live up to that promise. There's enough uncontrollable and senseless suffering to begin with. We shouldn't accept the man-made oppression that goes on within institutions. So as a social worker, I hope to help make changes that will ensure the dignity and safety of the most vulnerable people. And another value that I find to be of particular importance is the importance of human relationships. And I believe that we heal in relationships, and therefore we should strive for better relationships with ourselves and with other people. And that's why it's important to me that this is a part of my career. Someone else who has experienced the power of caring people and this has helped her to achieve her dreams in spite of rare disease is my friend Megan Crowley. And I got to speak to Megan. She graduated from Notre Dame the year after me. And I got to talk to her about what it has been like for her to try to craft a career. And she spoke about this idea of paying it forward by pursuing a master's in social work because she would one day like to start a company that has social workers go out into different schools in the state and help their kids with complex rare diseases like her own, Pompe, and their parents to navigate the academics and the ability for them to stay in school and reach their highest potential, like Megan is now at the University of North Carolina. So in summary, I believe that choosing a career requires an understanding of what makes you, you. So that is coupled with this assessment and this appreciation for your strengths and your limitations, and then helping yourself learn how to achieve what you want, and aligning that with your why, and holding that sense of purpose close to your heart in a way that will sustain your efforts to do what it is you want to be in and for the world. So thank you.
All right, good afternoon. So forgive me if I don't know how to use a clicker. I'm a lawyer. We don't do technology stuff. We just write things. So thankfully, I'm in a room of people who aren't doctors. Normally when I speak, I'm speaking to physicians, so I have to crack a lawyer joke because nobody wants to talk in a room when there's a lawyer there, especially one that does healthcare compliance. So it's actually really nice to talk to patients and parents and things so I don't have to crack a joke about my profession. So a little bit about legal disclaimers because I have to do this. So just so you know that presentation is for information purposes only. It's not legal advice. Attending this presentation does not establish an attorney-client relationship. Unfortunately, I'm unable to answer specific questions about the laws in any state in which I'm not admitted to practice. And if you have any questions concerning your rights as an employee, contact a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. I will generally refer you to your state bar. If you just Google, if you live in Nebraska, Nebraska State Bar, they'll give you a hotline and you can call them and then they can refer you to an attorney that practices employment law or disability law or whatever question you may have. They have somebody for it. I even know somebody who does ambulance law, so just putting that out there. So my story first. I was thinking of like a meme that I could pick that would describe my journey with a rare disease. And so Aliens guy from the History Channel is like spot on because my disease is kind of crazy. I lived 27 years of my life as a perfectly healthy person. I was always around medicine because I have a younger brother who has autism and mild cerebral palsy, and we grew up very close. We're kind of Irish twins. He was born 3 months premature, so we're 9 months apart, and we're very close. So growing up, I always advocated for him. I never really had to advocate for myself. I was perfectly healthy. I came from corporate America. I was actually the #1 woman in sales in the southeastern United States for Enterprise in their commercial truck division. I was so successful that in January of 2014, Chrissy Taylor, the granddaughter of the founder of Enterprise, came to my office to meet me because I was doing so well. Despite being at the top of my company and getting the attention of the now CEO of a group that employs over 88,000 employees, when I got sick, they let me go. So I lost my job, I lost my independence, and on May 1st, 2014, I walked into a hospital and I had 7,000 platelets. And my doctor who took my CBC told me that she thought I was going to die. I was covered in bruises. I had these, and when I'm talking bruises, I'm talking things like it was taking, I used to play fast pitch softball. It was like I took a fast pitch softball all over my body. What I didn't realize at the time was it was actually signs of internal bleeding. And the day before I went to the hospital, I had hit the back of my head on the wheel well of a 26-foot box truck, and that should have killed me. And no one knows why it didn't. So I'm very fortunate. But as my journey with my disease progressed, and I ended up going through 3 hematologists and then ending up with a man named Dr. Ahn at the University of Miami, who I was very fortunate to spend a lot of time with and absorb his knowledge and kind of become his mentee. I lost a lot of control of my life. At 27, I thought I had it all figured out. I had been in a long-term relationship. We lived together. I had planned marriage, children, and I stand in front of you now. He has since passed away, and I am 33. I'm an attorney, and I have no kids. So life comes at you fast. It's definitely different. But my journey wasn't easy. So when I got sick and I lost my job, I really didn't know what to do. I was still fighting for my life, and that was my priority, but a very good friend of mine called me, and he was like, Candace, you know, you should go back to school, and you should get a doctorate degree. And my friend that told me this, his name is Manoj, and he's a brilliant guy, and he's getting his PhD, and I just thought to myself, Manoj, I can't go back. And he goes, no, I think you should be a lawyer. Now, my mother's a lawyer. For years, she was trying to get me to go to law school. I didn't want to go to law school. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I was like, I don't want to be one of those stuffy people. Forget it. So I ignored him. Then I sat down one day with a neighbor of mine who survived a very rare form of leukemia, and he says to me, you know what, Candace, you should be a lawyer. And I thought to myself, I like this neighbor. I like one of my very good friends. Maybe they have a point. So I decided to apply to law school in the midst of repurposing a chemotherapy drug that ultimately saved my life. And I applied and got in, and I said to myself, all right, I'll go to law school. I went through law school. I stayed in remission the whole time. I graduated in 2.5 years. I got a scholarship to Seton Hall to get my healthcare compliance certification because I wrote my story about how I got sick and I decided to rebuild my life. But it wasn't enough at that point. I was like, I need to keep going. So I graduated early and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and take the bar. I'm gonna take the bar before my friends that I started law school with even finished law school. So I took the bar February of last year, and I passed on the first try. I was relieved, because if you know anything about the bar exam, especially in the state of Florida, it is very tough. And it was 70 hours a week of studying. I had no life. My best friend Cynthia and I would meet once a week for a drink, and we would cry to each other about how miserable everything was. But it was tough. And would I recommend doing it? No. If I was not in remission, I wouldn't have been able to do it. But I still looked back every milestone I hit and looked back to the girl who was in corporate America and had her whole life ahead of her, and I would still get angry because I had all of that taken away from me, and I never had a reason why. And then everything that happened to me along the way, every bad thing that occurred, every death of somebody I cared about, I would say, why me? What did I do that all of this bad karma is coming on me? So I became a lawyer, and there was a debate. What do I do? Do I go into big law? Do I become one of those lawyers like you see on television, working at the fancy firm, making a lot of money, 70 hours a week? I go live in DC, New York, New Jersey, wherever. And I was warned by family friends, don't go to big law. And I'm like, why? Yeah, they're getting offers, and they go, the minute you get sick, you're gonna get fired. And I thought to myself, so it's gonna happen to me again. It's gonna be a cycle. So in March of this year, when I came out of remission and my platelets dive bombed to 53,000 while I was in DC, I realized I made the right choice to go to work with my mom. So unfortunately, my mom couldn't be here today, but I was very fortunate to have that mom who was a lawyer, because she said, come to work for me, because we know you're gonna come out of remission at some point. It's not an if, it's when, and we can be ready. So for a good chunk of this year, Unfortunately, Dr. On had retired, and I saw a new doctor, and he didn't want to treat me. He just wanted to put me on prednisone and let me go. If you follow me on Twitter or you read my blog, I will talk about how much I hate prednisone. And I have a few certain choice expletives to describe what I think of that drug that I won't share here. Because this live stream, I have no idea who's watching this. But I can't stand prednisone. And so I ended up finding a doctor who I knew was at my research institution under Dr. On as a med student. And I followed him and found him. And I said, hey, doctor, can we use Rituxan? And we did. So I used Rituxan in July, and on July 23rd, I was declared in remission again. So I got I call it my third chance. And I realized when I was advocating for my drug with a new insurance company, because when I did it the first time, I was on COBRA from Enterprise. So I had great health insurance, employee health insurance. This time around, I was on an exchange plan, and they didn't want to pay for it. So I had to argue, and it was very helpful being an attorney because it was like, all right, well, if you're not going to give me what I want, I'm just going to sue you. And then all of a sudden, everyone's like, oh, wait a minute. So suddenly, those 2.5 years of being beaten to death in a law school classroom was great. So I've definitely taken an unusual journey to becoming an attorney. I went to law school like 29, 30. I was one of the oldest people in my class. So it was a little strange being in a room with like 22-year-olds who could stay up all night and party and go to class and get an A on their exam, and I'm sitting there like, I have terrible brain fog, and what am I doing with my life? But now that I'm out and now that I'm practicing, it's completely different. I do employment law on the company side, which is why I was excited to come here today to talk to you about what you can do about interviews and talking about your rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act and how to get accommodations and how to have a career with a rare disease. But also, I get to regurgitate my Americans with Disabilities Act knowledge and the fact that I took disability law in law school, and I'm very excited about that because I felt like when I took that class, there's no topic on the bar exam. So if you're like, when you take classes in law school, you almost just have to take what's on the bar, and I was a rebel, so I didn't. So I feel like I got one up on law school. So let's talk about the ADA, because pre-2009, my condition, which is ITP, would not be protected by the ADA. Why? Because I go into periods of remission. So therefore, I wouldn't be able to claim disability. The one thing that frustrates me about people in my profession is that they will always tell you, oh, you should just file for disability. No, if you want to work, you should go work. There's ways to do it. Don't ever let anybody tell you you can't do it, because for a long time, that's what I got. Every bad thing that ever happened to me, you should just give up. And even the inner voice, give up, walk away. No, don't let anybody, you dig your heels in the sand and you be stubborn. And my friends in the room who know me will tell you, I'm the most stubborn person ever. I will not back down. I will make it 1,000,000 times worse so I get my way. But that's what makes it fun to be a lawyer. So, what do we consider a disability under the law? 2009, it changed. If you have a condition that goes into remission, but when it's active, you are sick, and it impacts a major bodily function. Like for me, it's my immune system, and also the ability to clot. You're protected under the ADA. And so I know that Global Genes is providing these slides. I have a lot of law on here. At the bottom of the slide is from the EEOC, the link to all the laws. So you can go through and read them if you're interested in kind of learning a little bit more about this. I'm not going to give you a law school lecture because you'll all leave and throw tomatoes at me. Because that's all I wanted to do when I was in law school. So what do you do when you have a disability and you go to apply for a job? Do you tell them? That's the first question I always get. Do I tell people I have a disability? You don't need to. And it depends on what your disability is. Obviously, if like there's times where if I'm in a really bad shape and perhaps I take a wheelchair. Of course, if I was going to go to a job that required a very strong physical showing, like when I worked at Enterprise, I was driving big trucks, I was in and out of them, I would sometimes have to clean them to get to an account. I couldn't do that now, so I would need to ask for an accommodation. Hey, guess what? You're not going to be able to put me at a branch where I need to do that. But now that I'm an attorney, I sit at a computer, or I'm at a desk, or I'm at a podium, so I don't have to worry about it. I generally tell people that if you don't want to talk about your disability because you don't think it's going to impact your job, you don't need to volunteer that information. But at the same time, too, there's a new trend in America where employers are hiring people with disabilities. And because my brother's autistic, I follow a lot of groups that, and a lot of companies that hire people with special needs, which is really awesome. I'm from the South, so Publix grocery stores is really good about that. Where I'm from in South Florida, we have a car wash that employs men and women with special needs and teaches them how to run a business, which is really, really great. So there's a lot of people out there, there's always this sort of like I'd say the stigma of like, oh, employers don't want to hire people with disabilities or rare diseases. That's not true at all. Know your limitations, know what your capabilities are, and also don't sell yourself short just because you read a description on LinkedIn or Indeed or Monster and you think maybe it wouldn't work for you. So reasonable accommodations. Well, what can they do for me? I'll tell you this, they can't build you the Brooklyn Bridge, but they can get you a special chair, or they can get you the desk. Something that's reasonable. And I'm not going to read through all of these because I used to be insane when people would do this, but ultimately, it's very simple stuff. If you're not going to have somebody that's going to buy you a special chair that you're going to take home. That doesn't work that way. But they can work around your job. Another thing is the work schedule, because I get asked about this all the time. What do I do about if I need to leave to get blood work done, or I need to go to a doctor's appointment? These kinds of like modified schedules or part-time schedules are part of and protected by the ADA. And generally what you would do is, if you're in a large corporation, you would talk to HR, and HR would work with you on this. So the interview process, yes. So this is where it gets dicey. If you have a disability that someone can see, because of course if I walk in, no one has any idea I have a blood disorder unless I am covered in bruises, in which case then you think I was an MMA fighter. People may just ask you, what are you capable of doing? And you'll see in some job descriptions, perhaps let's say you went to work for Barnes & Noble, must be able to lift a box 25 to 35 pounds. Okay, I may look like I'm able to lift a box at 25 or 35 pounds, but to be honest with you, I also have Sjogren's syndrome, and sometimes my wrists just give out. So the truth is no. But I wouldn't stop myself and say I'm not going to apply for that job, because I'll still apply and be like, listen, I saw in this that you were looking for that. Sometimes I just don't have a good day. People will pick up the slack. The one thing that I did in between Enterprise and law school is I actually ran a restaurant, Family Friends restaurant. I was very blessed that they gave me the opportunity to be their general manager. And it was really great because I worked during chemo and I had employees help me out. And so you'll find if you go to work in a job, or let's say you get sick again, or perhaps you flare, because we always talk about, some of us with these chronic conditions have flares. Your friends and your coworkers will pick up the slack for you. Don't be afraid to say, hey, listen, I'm having a really bad day, I'm struggling. Can you help me? I think a lot of times we get so wrapped up in what does HR think, or is there a policy for this or paper, that we forget the humanity of we're all working, we're all here at a job, we have camaraderie. If you have a job, you think about like some of your friends that are employees. I have friends that joke about like a work husband or work wife, right? And you're very close and you watch out for each other. These are your people, they're your tribe, as we talked about. When you have these people in your place of employment, don't be afraid to ask them for a little bit of help if you have a job. When you're going through the interview process, though, it is really a really good idea to search on groups and websites like Glassdoor.com. If you go on Glassdoor and let's say you're interested in applying for a position, you can read about the company there. And it's really great because sometimes people will go on and say, hey, this is a really great place for somebody who may have a physical disability, or my child got very sick and HR worked with me to make sure that I could make appointments and get to and from the doctor or drop them off at school. And those are really good signs. If you go on Glassdoor and the company you're applying to has 1,000 negative reviews and one good one, that's a red flag for you. So that's just something like some practical advice as to what you can do. So you're looking at the important facts now, and this is on the website, but one thing I wanted to highlight is the undue hardship on the operation of the employer's business. You can't expect to get a job and work in a place where it could put your safety or the safety of someone else at risk. So let's say, like physically, I can't lift 35-pound boxes. I'm not going to go work in a warehouse because God forbid I drop a box on someone and a ladder, I'm going to kill them. So, and there's OSHA and all these other laws that I won't get into, but that's the thing. So knowing your limitations and understanding the role in your job is very important. However, that doesn't mean that if you need to have a special desk, that they can't provide you with a special desk. Perhaps it's a little lower, a little higher, a different type of desk chair, things like that. Maybe a different meal period. Sometimes I know companies have okay, from 12 to 1, we're gonna eat, but let's say you need 1 to 1:30, they can work with you on that. That's not an unreasonable accommodation. And so in order for them to provide you with an accommodation, you have to tell them. That's the other thing. The law pre-2009 used to be that if they thought you could possibly have a disability, they'd have to do something for you. But that's also kind of crazy if you think about it, because it's like, what if you're perfectly able-bodied and your boss thinks you're an idiot and you need an accommodation because you're just not there? It's slightly insulting. But on the same token, too, if you're totally okay working in your job and you don't need an accommodation, there's no sense in having to tell your boss, hey, I have this condition if you want to keep it private. And ultimately, that's where and why the law was changed. You have the ability and you have the autonomy to let your employer know whether or not you're sick. So these are the key things that you know. An employer cannot make up the cost of providing a reasonable accommodation by lowering your salary or paying you less than other employees in a similar position. I want to hammer this home. Do not let them pay you less. If your coworkers are making $10 an hour and they're going to pay you $8, that's against the law. If it's the same job and the same job description, don't let them take advantage of you. The ADA does not require that an employer hire an applicant with a disability over another applicant. I think that's something that you should know. But obviously, we like to praise and elevate companies that actively seek out to employ those with disabilities, as that's just a good thing to do. And the ADA permits an employer to refuse to hire an individual if they pose a direct threat to the health or safety of themselves or others. And this is very important too. Comes down to safety and OSHA and making sure that everybody's safe in the workplace and they don't have a workman's comp claim. So, working within your limitations, considering your strengths and weaknesses when deciding a job or career. What are you good at? What do you like? What interests you? Do you want to be an artist? Do you want to be a lawyer? Don't be a lawyer. Do you want to be a doctor? Whatever you want to do, you have the ability to make it happen. We have laws in place to protect people like us who are sick, or to protect your children if you're here listening because you have a rare child. The big thing is don't compare yourself to others. Law school was very competitive, and so for me it was really like a mind bender, because I was always looking at the able-bodied people and comparing myself to them, and I'm like, then I would remind myself, I can't do that, I have a rare disease. I can't look at them and say, well, why am I not keeping up with them? Career change is possible at any age. I want to harp on this because there's a discrepancy between if you're born with the condition and then you come into it decades later. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter if you're 3/4 of the way through college and you realize, you know what, I don't want to do nursing. I want to do business. Then change. Don't hold yourself to it. Be adaptable. In our medical lives, we're adaptable. We have to be. We're rare disease patients. We walk into an office and the doctor has to pull out a medical dictionary because they don't know what you have. Same thing with your job, your career, what you like to do. Don't be afraid to switch too. If you've been in nursing for 10 years and you don't like it anymore and you want to be a lawyer, go be a lawyer. Don't call me, but go be a lawyer. And the big thing I really, really want to push home is don't be afraid to start your own company. I think one of the most empowering things as an attorney is that I help people create businesses or start nonprofits or do ventures or become independent contractors. And it is really rewarding to see people take their passion and decide that instead of working for somebody and answering to someone, they take it upon themselves. And so if you have a talent, or perhaps maybe you're working for somebody right now and you're thinking, maybe I should branch out. Maybe I should go take that job, or what if I started my own company? Don't be afraid to do that. It really don't. And you'll find in some situations, in some states, in some localities, there's a lot of free resources for people in the community to help start a business. And there's something that is very empowering is when people learn your story, they actually want to work with you because they're like, oh, wow, well, you have like a drive and you have a conviction to be in this business. And so that's something that's very important. And One thing I also want to talk about, because we don't talk about it a lot, is with men. If men want to take up a trade. I know that there's always this push to go to college and get a degree and then go work in corporate America. I have a lot of friends with rare diseases who are like, you know what, I really want to be an electrician. Like, I like it, but you know, everybody's telling me to go to college. Don't be afraid to go to a trade school. If you like that stuff, there are people begging for electricians and plumbers, and some of the greatest businessmen I know started a job like that. They went and did an apprenticeship, let's say, as a plumber, and now they own a plumbing company and they're wildly successful. So don't sell yourself short. I see a lot of people, if you have a lot of health issues and you're just, you're trying to get back on your feet, consulting work in whatever business you have is a really great way to kind of adapt to your, just adapt to your health and your current situation and your scheduling conflicts. And if you want to go to school, one of the most important things is to make sure to reach out to your disability advocate group, talk to your advisors, and create a plan with all of your professors. I wish I could tell you that every person that you come across in your journey, both in college and grad school and in your early start in your career, or perhaps changing careers, is going to be understanding. That's not necessarily the case, but when a door closes, another one opens. So keep in mind and keep tabs on, like, oh, this person, I talked to them, they seemed interested. You'll find a lot of ways around your limitations, and ultimately that's what I did, was what can I do within what I'm passionate about without putting myself out there like I was in 2014 when I first lost my job. So, awesome. I know we'll take some questions. And I'll be available after if somebody has a question or they don't want to ask in person or in front of a room. I'm happy to talk to you guys out in the hallway.
Okay, so we're going to,
Hello, Candace. Thank you for saying about having a rare disease and being an electrician, because I've got rare disease and I used to be an electrician. So thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. That's great.
Thank you both. That was great. My question is, how and who qualifies you as being labeled as disabled? For those people with invisible illnesses, what tools or how do you get qualified to be considered disabled?
So under the law, it says if there's a major body function that's impacted, so like let's say you have hemophilia, right? And the inability to clot. If you look at somebody with hemophilia, you can't tell. And they can take factor and be normal. They're still disabled. Like with my disease, even though I have low platelets, even when my platelets are normal, I'm considered disabled because my immune system doesn't function properly. So for the most part, if you do file for disability, a lot of times what disability lawyers will tell you is that depending on the state and depending on the factors of the percentage of how much it impacts your life, there's adjustments for that. It's hard to say because it's an individual basis and it depends on the diagnosis as well. One of the struggles in rare diseases is that a lot of these review boards and the people that approve this have never seen a lot of the conditions that are being applied for. Because even ITP patients have to fight to get disability.
My question is I guess to go further or deeper into it, is I don't qualify for disability, but it's not because of my illness, it's because of my work credits. So I have not been able to qualify for disability benefits. But at the same time, physically, if they didn't count the work credits, I would qualify for disability. So how do I navigate that label? Is it just the qualifying for disability, which would mean I have disability, or is it some other way?
What state are you in?
I'm in Maryland.
You're in Maryland. Okay. To my knowledge, most state bars have a disability law group. See, in Florida, I have a really good group of people that do disability law and handle some of this because the work credit thing is tough. And then, and if you don't have it, it's like, what do you do at that point? I would recommend reaching out to the Maryland bar and seeing, you can go on their website too and search disability and see if there's a group there and see if you can call the bar and get a referral to somebody to ask them, like, well, what could we do? Because from there, they may be able to figure out how to position you correctly. That's one of those areas of the law that it's very hit or miss, because you could meet somebody that's sort of in your same position and they have disability. And there's no real rhyme, to me, at least from what I've seen practicing, there's no real rhyme or reason for it, unless you have like one of those, like those conditions that they are like, all right, absolutely 100%, like you're disabled.
Okay, so if I was employed and I had some disability issue, would I be covered under the disability law, or because I don't have so I don't get disability benefits, would I not qualify under any disability law?
Well, the ADA protects you in an employment situation, so it's different from benefits per se. But if, like, let's say you're getting employer-sponsored benefits, it's going to depend entirely on the plan that the employer picks. So, like, if let's say you go to work somewhere and then they have disability insurance, it's going to depend on whatever plan they pick. But it's super important that if you are employed, that you check, what your health insurance is, if they offer disability, the little duck, Aflac, like if they have Aflac, things like that, and read the fine print. And I hate saying that because as a lawyer, the fine print makes me crazy too. But read the fine print, because and if you are able to take employer-sponsored health insurance, you should also know what it does cover and doesn't cover. And then if you have to go out, what do you do? And COBRA, I mean, I could give a 5-hour lecture on all of that crazy stuff, but I hope that helps you a little bit. But do reach out to the Maryland Bar, because they should have somebody who could possibly point you in the right direction, or get you some help, like legal aid or something could step in to assist you.
Thank you.
I don't know if you mentioned this, but the Department of Rehabilitation, did you mention that? That's a federal program. It's in every state. I don't think it's called the same thing in every state, but I did their program for returning to work, and they guide you through the process. So at least where I did it in California, you do not mention your disability. You say nothing if it's not visible, and go in asking for nothing if you can. And if your doctor is going to write you a letter, you don't say your diagnosis. Keep it simple and ask for what you need. I had a wonderful experience there. You can keep your benefits while you're returning to work for some period of time. And I think, to answer your question, the definition of disabled is not if you were ever on disability. So it really is that simple. So if that's helpful.
Yeah, California has some of probably the more friendly employee laws, but every state is a lot different. Like in Florida, it's completely different. And you also have the issue of, if you live in a right to work state, technically they can terminate your employment without a reason. And that reason could technically be because you're disabled, and they don't have to tell you, and they possibly could get away with it, which is why I err on the side of caution and telling you to just go in and tell them everything. But if you do need an accommodation, you have to tell them in order for them to even give it to you.
Hi, so I wanted to share really quickly my last experience working, which was 6 years ago in Silicon Valley as a woman. Worked for an extremely popular company. There were not a lot of women. I only knew of maybe 3 other people without being ill or having disabilities. So while I was working there, I'd gotten sicker and sicker and sicker. They started allowing me to do more work from home time. Over a period of a few weeks, there became this paranoia on the team of people wanting to know why they weren't getting the same sort of accommodation. And then I was told that I personally had to make one-on-ones to tell these people about my disability to justify my need to do that. And not only was that really traumatizing for me, but most of those people were extremely uncomfortable. And I thought about going to HR about the recommendation that manager made. And around the same time, I found out that we had hired a person who was my assistant who was making $25,000 more than me. And I got fired within a week of that time without any explanation. So I'm wondering, when HR is your thought of, though this is where I'm going to because something wrong is being done, how can you protect yourself before going into that meeting to make sure that you're not going to be taken advantage of?
In this situation, I will say the best thing you can do is consult an attorney. an employment, and you would want to find an employee, like an employee rights attorney, somebody that does employment law on the employee side, to help you, to have maybe perhaps advocate for you, because of course, if they're going to be hiring an assistant, paying them $25,000 more, and then playing this game with you, and depending on your state, they could be violating multiple laws.
Right.
And unfortunately, your story isn't at all uncommon. You know, that's that part. When I left Enterprise, one of my very good friends took my job. They gave it to her. So they gave her my position. And she, of course, was horrified because she wanted nothing more than to work with me, not in my place. But it's a very common thing. But that would be an opportunity to consult an attorney. And depending on the jurisdiction and the type of attorney, I think sometimes they do it where you're not paying by the hour. Let's say you'll once the case is settled, perhaps, they can get attorney's fees. And really, it depends on the jurisdiction and the type of claim you have, too, because in some states, the statutes will allow for the collection of attorney's fees, in which case, if you sue your employer and you win, the employer will pay your lawyer, which is very nice.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Yes, woohoo, that's what we want.
Yeah, we have time for one more.
So just real quick, I had a meeting this morning with a company called Disability In, and if you all haven't heard of them, check them out. They produce the annual report of organizations and their ranking in terms of hiring from disabled communities, and it is fabulous. And to see the companies that repeatedly appear on those rankings and how that's growing over the past several years is really powerful. So take a look at them. I'm not sponsored by them. I was just really empowered by their message this morning.
We've got time for just one more question.
Sorry, I just want to say you guys are amazing, but also I had a question. I guess this is regarding more like education-wise. So I've been changing my major like pretty much every semester. It kind of depends on like how I feel health-wise, I guess. And I guess my interest is more like environmental science, but I wanted to be more on the conservation side. So you have to go out into the field. And then I figured if I ever send in, sorry, this is like squeaking. No, it's okay. Closer? Okay. So I guess if you, somebody who isn't in a wheelchair, I guess, would probably get the job. I would think either get the scholarship or the job, like, because they are able to, like, go out into the field. So I was just like, how would you work around that? Because it is kind of hard at the end of the day, like, there are requirements for, like, a job or, like, so. I guess this goes out to both of you.
In this situation, it's tough because it's not like you can hide that you're in a wheelchair, right? It's not like, hey, I showed up, and like I think of like the Halloween costumes, and like my friend's son is in a wheelchair, and dad made him a tank one year. It's like you show up in a tank, and it's like, hey, I'm here. So what do you do? Yeah, when you were in, you have mobility assistive devices, and you want the job. And especially for something like conservation. I grew up in South Florida where the Everglades is, and so growing up, we'd go out there and and it was a lot of fun. But yeah, my brother couldn't go on those trips with cerebral palsy. So what do? You can't hide it, right? So I'd say you flip it around the other way. You embrace it. Like, listen, I can't change my situation physically. Here I am. But despite my limitation in this area, I may have less here in terms of I'm going to need a little more help to get out there. But I'm 110%. This is my passion. This is what I want to do. And the right group who's going to help you and wants to work with you will make it happen. And I think one of the things that we struggle with as rare disease patients is we're trying to constantly adapt to the world around us, right? And we have to adapt in the medical communities and with doctors. The truth is that we need to flip the script, which is they adapt to us. We're here. We're not going to change. We're not going to magically get better or we're going to just wake up one day and take that magical oil and we're walking again or our immune systems function normally. Here's the difference. I'm very passionate because even as an attorney with a rare disease, I struggle with like, well, am I going to get this client? Because if you Google me, you'll read all about my stuff. Well, the truth is, you know what? I'm committed to what I do. I love what I do. If you're interested in conservation and that's what you want to do, don't let any physical limitation stop you. Double down on it if you need to. And when you double down on it, they're going to look at you and instead of seeing a disability, they're going to see an enhanced ability because you're there and you show your commitment to it. And I think that's how you fight it. So.
All right, those are some awesome questions. All right, everyone, that was awesome. Those are such great questions. So thank you, Francie and Candace, for sharing your valuable information. Let's give them a round of applause. They're awesome.
Good job. I loved it, Christy.
All right, before you leave, I would just like to remind you all if you could take our quick survey on the app. We would appreciate your feedback. A quick note, many of our speakers throughout the day may be able to answer some more questions. For our audience, we ask that as you move into the networking break sponsored by Regeneron, Regeneron. I apologize. I'm very, but if you also haven't had a chance, we encourage you to use our appointment system to connect with others. And don't forget to visit the Exhibitors Pavilion, sponsored by PRA Health Sciences, and check out our poster presentations, sponsored by Aldervron. I'm sorry. I'm getting very used to saying more pharmaceutical type names, but we're getting there. So thank you all so much, and we hope you all enjoy the break.